It's Wednesday, the 22nd of June, 2022. Welcome to the Fast Five by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, in keeping with the Fast Five and 5 minutes and 5 business stories, very quick milestone that's worth pointing out across our Fear and Greed slate of podcasts, of which the Fast Five is a very important part. We have ticked over 5 million downloads so far this financial year.
Pretty good. So thank you to all those listeners out there who are helping us out, downloading us every day.
All right, let's jump into the stories. We've got 5 to get through in less than 5 minutes now because I took up a bit of time there. Story number 1, Reserve Bank boss Philip Lowe yesterday said he didn't believe there was a recession on the horizon, even as interest rates are rising.
Dr. Lowe said the fundamentals of the Australian economy are strong, households aren't overly indebted and companies are willing to hire people. Now, those facts don't sound like a precursor to a recession, according to Dr. Lowe. While the record low unemployment rate might rise, that's not even necessary to get inflation back down to the 2 to 3% range that he's looking for. He spoke about inflation being a result of global factors, supply chain disruptions, Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, higher oil and food prices, rising demand globally, as well as local factors. Households are spending more post-COVID. There aren't enough staff available. One of the most critical challenges for the economy is making sure inflation expectations don't become entrenched. If they do, it's much harder to get rates down. All in all, Dr. Lowe said interest rates will keep rising. The governor said they're too low for an economy with low unemployment and high inflation. He added that there is not a preset path to where rates will get to or how fast they'll get there. All that will be guided by data. However, he did say that 4%, which some financial markets are predicting, seemed just a touch high to him.
All right, on to story number 2, Sean. And the New South Wales government has handed down a budget full of goodies, which it hopes is going to be funded by the property market, by foreign investors and by gaming revenue.
State Treasurer Matt Keane said the economy should expand by 4.25% in the next 12 months. The budget deficit will soar to $11.3 billion, though. In total, debt will hit $114 billion by 2026. Now is not the time to slow spending, the Treasurer said, and the state will return to surplus over the medium term thanks to growth dividends. There's money for childcare, there's money for parents of school children, there's money in the renewable space. As already announced, the government will trial a shared equity program for some workers buying a house. Premier Dominic Perrottet's desire to abolish stamp duties and replace it by land tax took a baby step forward. Some first homeowners will be allowed that. Got to say, this sounds like an election budget. And, of course, there's an election in New South Wales in March next year.
Yes, indeed. And, Sean, story number 3 is kind of linked in a way to story number 2 because it was also yesterday, the day that the Queensland government released its state budget.
Yeah, and in some ways this is much more interesting because what the Queensland government has done is hit the big coal miners with new royalties. They want to use the money to fund health and transport projects. Royalties on coal have been frozen in Queensland for 10 years. That ends on June 30. Miners will now have to pay much, much higher royalties. It sent the share price of some of the Queensland-based coal miners down significantly. Not everyone's against it, though, because the idea of having a disincentive for coal miners is liked by some people, obviously. Queensland will also introduce a new payroll tax levy to fund mental health services over the next 5 years, and there's plenty of money for infrastructure. Budget deficits in that state will hit $1 billion or more next financial year.
Okay, on to story number 4. The end of the financial year is a little more than a week away now, Sean, and with financial markets having sold off so ferociously, a lot of super fund members might find their holdings fell during the 2022 financial year.
And that would be the first time in more than a decade for most people. Research house Chant West estimates the median growth fund, which has between 60 and 80% of money devoted to growth assets like shares, will end the financial year down 5%. Now, that's better than the share market itself. The ASX 200, for example, is off about 10%. The difference is because of investments away from equities, things like bonds or cash or alternatives. A negative result for the year would only be the 5th such result in 30 years since the introduction of compulsory super in 1992. And of course, those funds went up on average by about 18% last year. Still, no one likes to see their super go backwards.
No, certainly not. All right, last one, Sean. Story number 5. Big news from Qantas. The airline has announced that face masks will no longer be required on non-stop international flights to the US, UK and to Italy from Australia.
An internal memo called it an important step. The decision was made in line with changes made to airport requirements last week, and they came into effect at 1 minute past midnight last night. Great news for travellers, obviously. The bad news is that airports are already warning there's going to be long queues this school holiday season. Sydney Airport Chief Executive Jeff Colbert said it was great people are travelling, but the terminals will be very, very busy.
Yep, sounds like chaos. All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 22nd of June, 2022. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.